Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. I think today's episode is more accurately described as Blue Home. I do not have a copy of the Holmes version of AD&D. That is the rule set that is being used for the excellent AD&D campaign run by Dan Davis, whose blog I'll have a link in the description. He is running the Burning Sands campaign. Before we get into today's battle, we have to do a little bit of setup here, okay? Some of you guys have been asking me about patron play in D&D, and it is such a radical departure from the game as people have been playing it for 40 years that a lot of viewers are struggling with an understanding of what it looks like in practice. And because we're talking about tabletop gaming, the short, pithy answer is it looks like whatever you want it to look like. You know, it's going to depend on your table. But what I can do is show you what it looks like in one case by presenting to you an epic, game-changing moment and how it all comes together, how it gets resolved. And then, because I am doing this engagement on the channel, everybody involved is going to see the results at the same time as you, dear viewer. And what happens after this resolution, that depends on the players, and that depends on the DM, in this case, Dan Davis. The world is, well, here's a map. It's the Burning Sands, and it is a patron level D&D campaign. Today, we're going to zoom in on this crossroads right here, the city of Ur. And the city of Ur is in trouble because I have a map of the city of Ur right here, and I'll throw up a better version on the edited version. The city of Ur is led by King Cull, a usurper. His repeated failure to provide for the security and safety of his new subjects have resulted in resentment and rage burning through the streets. For weeks, violence and corruption have gripped the recently freed city of Ur. Even the wells of the city, which have historically provided free water for all, are in the hands of petty gang lords, jackals in men's skins who charge extortion money for what should be every person's birthright. Yet the king does nothing. At first, the reason was chalked up to callous cruelty, one tyrant for another. But now, rumors spread that the reason is a far graver sin, weakness. As even the most pampered bathhouse slave could tell you, weak things are not long-lived in the Burning Sands. The Burning Sands, of course, is this campaign world, and it is kind of a Dark Sun or Barsoomian flavor, you know, shades of the Crusade going on here. Just generally wretched and miserable place to live, but a place that is ripe for adventure. Already, the vultures gather to clean the corpse of the city of Ur. 10 miles to the west of the city, a horde of Thark warriors, led by Tal Karshak, has gathered. They have sent no emissary, spokesperson, or herald, but even a nearsighted old beggar could read their intentions. The Tharks are not creatures given to idle discussion, especially not when a weakened enemy lays vulnerable at their feet. 10 miles to the east, and fresh off his victory at Al Bayt, the host of Bela Khan appears. As is his custom, he has sent forth a herald. Once within shouting distance of the gate, the herald of the Khan delivers his message. Now, at this point, I should point out, we are dealing with a three-pronged faction conflict. You've got the local defenders, you've got Tal Karshak of the Tharks, and you have Bela Khan. Okay? So bear that in mind. Those are the three factions that are involved in today's video. The Herald of the Khan delivers his message. What does this tell us? This tells us that the Khan's forces have arrived first. And the Herald cries out, "Hearken to the words of my master, whom the dragon, the Leviathan, the son of heaven, has appointed to rule. Behold, his cup is forged of coffin nails, brimming with wrath and poised before his lips, but he has not yet drunk. Hark! These are his words. I speak to you, free men of Ur. Do you now see that your tyrant has made you his slaves, penning you in the like cattle in the walls of Ur? Deliver him then to me. Hand over to Bela Khan, the brigand Cull, that I may pass judgment over him. Open your city to me, and I will be as tender to you as a mare to her foals. I will appoint just rulers over you and drive out those who would enslave you. Those who deny the wells of Ur, which were given to all men, will have no place in your city. Freemen of peace is but a dream in the dunes, but freedom is in your hands. The words of Belacan. So we're going to stick a fork in that. That's kind of where today's video starts out. You've got a city in the center of the plains that is being attacked by a combined force of Tharks and Belacan's men, which I take to be kind of a weird amalgamation of, is it Star Trek's Wrath of Khan? I don't need to know this. This is all just flavor text. And, basically Saladin's style, Al-Qadim, if you will. I know the world is very much a Dark Sun kind of world. Oh, excuse me. My voice is already giving out. This is so exciting. All right, so let's take a look at the Defenders of They have a total of about 2,200 warriors, poorly equipped. They've got 2,000 able-bodied citizens that have been press-ganged into service. These guys are all about one hit die. And then they have 500 Red Slayers. These elite troops and ex-gladiators, if I understand correctly, King Cull came out of the gladiator arena. That's this guy right here. Right, so here's the palace grounds. This is where Cull is doing a whole lot of nothing. He and his 500 Red Slayers now rule the city. And that's what the yellow is for. This is the palace grounds. However, they haven't done a whole lot for the people. Here is the Defenders' plan. They are going to keep all of the Red Slayers in the palace grounds, with the exception of 20 Red Slayers who remain with the king at all times. If the city falls, they will 20 of them will spirit the king out of the palace. The other 480 will go into the city streets themselves, and formations of about, the Slayers will, in bands of 10, they'll use hit-and-run tactics and melt into the narrow alleys. Everybody else is, this is where things get a little complicated. Before we get into the timeline, let's take a look at the forces available to one of the players. And this is how you set up a campaign of your own, right? Hey, look, he's got about, what is this going to be? 4,200 able-bodied citizens at one hit die each, and then another 2,000 hit dice worth of expert guys. 500 Red Slayers, right? So we're looking at about 6,200 hit dice worth of defenders in the city, but they have the walls, which is a huge force multiplier. Call it 10 times, you would need an army of 60,000 to force the gates. All right, up against that, you have the forces of the Tharks, who are a little bit late to the party. They've got 2,850 Thark warriors, and these are bad dudes, right? 5 hit dice each. They've got 10 white apes. These are the monsters, right? Giant apes with 8 hit dice. Then they've got almost 1,000 cavalry and 200 elite warriors. Altogether, you're looking at about 21,000 hit dice worth of Tharks attacking from the west, okay? Then, on the other side, you've got Belacan, who shows up a little bit early, and he's got a smaller force. He's only got 92, let's put it this way. He's got more people, if you will. His forces number about 8,300 compared to just 5,000 for the Tharks, but they're not quite as tough. Only 2 hit dice each, right? The horse warriors are 2 hit dice. The horse archers are 3 hit dice. And then this last unit of green troops, they're kind of sprinkled together. And the way this works is Belacan says, look, here's my plan. I'm going to split my army into 3 forces that will look like this. Each of these 2 wings is horse archers. These are the hit and run tactics. And then you've got a main body of horse infantry that will charge forward. Hey, that's great for most set-piece battles. If we were in the Burning Sands themselves in the plains, you would be able to put together a wonderful little fight between the forces of Tal Karshak, and I'm sorry, I don't speak Thark, so sometimes I stumble over the words. You would be able to put together a nice and easy, use your 25 to 1, and all right, we got 3,000 here, then, maybe if we do, 50 to 1, okay, at 3,000, we're going to need 60 figures of Tharks, and here we got 5,000 warriors, so at, 100 to 1, you're going to need 50 human cavalry. Of course, if I was doing a stand-up battle, I would be doing this in 2 millimeters, so I would need, call it 75 stands of cavalry, right? And then, but we're not doing that. We're doing a city fight. We're doing a siege. Altogether, you're looking at about 40,000 hit dice worth of guys that are trying to take this city. I'm not set up to wargame, and here's that city again. I'm not set up to wargame a full-blown siege. But that's okay, because we're not doing a full-blown miniature wargame. We're doing an AD&D campaign, and this is just one chapter in that campaign. The information that you see here was shared with the DM over a period of a number of days and, I don't know, maybe even a number of weeks, right? This is a big process. This is a big project, and it takes time to organize all of this information, get your plans in order, and what you see here are the various plans for each of the forces, for the Tharks and for Bella-Khan. You'll see in a minute why there's a whole lot of if-then loops, and here's that go into this. Hey, we're going to do this, but if something happens, we're going to do that. And if something else happens, we're going to do that. And the reason that you as a player have to do that is because you have to trust the guys that you're gaming with, okay? A big part of the problem with modern D&D is that all of the rules are written to assume that you are playing with a bunch of knuckleheads. If you've done a lot of modern D&D, you can understand why that's the case. However, if you are gaming with decent people, then you don't have to worry about that, because you can do things like present this plan to the DM. Here's what my character is going to do in this big convoluted scenario. Please implement this plan to the best of your ability. And you trust the DM to do that. Now, in this case, the DM has turned to Mr. Wargaming and said, look, this is a really big battle. It's really complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. Can you handle this for me? And because I know all three of the players of these factions, where's that a third faction here? Because I know these guys, and because I, have some expertise, I can say, hey, this is not going to devolve into a set-piece battle. This is going to devolve into a city fight. And in this case, and I should point out, Dan is a veteran of the Battle of Fallujah. So he knows that city fighting is not like a set-piece battle that you would have in rural areas. That was as true back in the day back in the days of as it is back in the days of, the first decade of our own millennium. He trusts me enough to do this fight justice, and I'm putting this on camera so that everyone involved can see how the decision matrices work and how you can just send a nice detailed email to your DM. Here's what I want my faction to do. I also wanted to show you guys, look at this. This is almost 10,000 men. How many D&D games do you know of where people are controlling not 10,000 men? It takes a phenomenal amount of trust. This is gaming at a different level. This is gaming at a higher level than just, I've got a half-elf that hates his dad, and he's going to go on an adventure to get back at dad. This is an entirely different style of play. So this is how it works. Now we get into the if-then loops for the various sides. And here's where it gets interesting, because neither of the players of the besieging forces realize that the other guy has a plan to get into the city without having to lay siege to it. First, we'll look at the plan of Bella-Khan. You've already heard the plan of Bella-Khan, actually, because he sent his herald to the gates of the city to say, if you surrender the city, I will be a just ruler, and I will get rid of the strong men that are making your lives miserable. I will make the wells of available to all mankind. Because this is a city that has been put upon by its unjust rulers, rulers that they didn't choose, rulers that are siphoning the entire wealth of the city and giving it to their cronies in the palace here. Big think time. Some people think fantasy is all fake. Fantasy oftentimes has more to do with the real world than the history books. But the point is that people are not happy. So when the herald says, open the gates, a surprisingly large number of the people tasked with defending the city, remember what we have here? 2,000 able-bodied citizens press-ganged into service. They have no training and poor morale, and they say, you know what, the heck with this. The devil I know stinks. I'm going to open the gates for Bella-Khan and hope that the devil I don't know does a better job for us. Word of Belacon's message filters through the streets, and soon the courage of the majority of the troops fails. In other words, 53% of the troops failed their morale roll. Now I'm reading directly from the message that I got from the player by way of the DM. The men of the city either throw down their weapons and head for the safety of their home hearths, or they turn on their brethren and attempt to throw open the eastern gates of the city to welcome the invading army. The more stalwart defenders, shocked at this betrayal, turn on the cowards, and fighting erupts throughout the streets. Belacon knew that the gates would be opened. Well, he trusted his spies, informed him that that would happen. So the 2,000 press-ganged civilians stop taking orders from the king's men. They break off into groups of 20 to 100, and they act independently, mostly as neighborhood militias. You've got some Warrens up here that are poor. You've got some rich guys here with probably still paying their guards. And then, of course, there's Temple District, all the usual fantasy tropes, right? Some of these bands turn to loot and rapine, choosing to seize what they can as the city falls and hope to escape into the wilds with, I don't know, a nice big score. Old scores are settled and blood washes the streets and the walls of Ur. The men begin to fight each other as much as any invaders. All right, so that is Belacon's plan. As the hordes of the Khan appear on the horizon, actually they're probably pretty close, right? Because the herald is there. At any rate, only 150 men of the city man the gate, and they fight off the frenzied civilians and former comrades in arms who prefer surrender to the Khan. That's when the Tharks appear in the west. And the Tharks are also expecting the gates to be open because they have a little plan of their own. You see here, and I'll show you in black and white. You see, I'm not making this up. Tal Karshak has 20 loyal Thark warriors inside the city. These are ex-gladiators with another 50 or so motley human and demi-human ex-gladiators. So basically, once the herald shows up and delivers his message, I'm going to call him the Red Traitor. We need a name for this NPC, because this guy, this ex-gladiators, it says they are, where is it? Oh, the leader, a Thark officer and a turncoat Red Slayer, will claim to be reinforced. Oh, right, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So they are going to rally the guys, the gladiators. They're freeing the prisoners, and now you've got a band of 70 Tharks and humans. Grand total of, let me double check that. It's going to be 20 Thark warriors, so that's 100 hit dice. And another 50 guys at 2 hit dice each, hardened gladiators, so that's 200 hit dice worth of guys, who, once the city starts to erupt in violence, the Red Slayers close off the palace and form ranks around Cull. The gladiators lead a mini revolt, and they set out for the gates to pretend. Now remember this traitor Red Slayer, his aim is to pretend to be reinforcements for the guys at the gates, and then once he gets there, he will open the gates for the Tharks and Belacon, expecting that the two armies are going to share in the spoils. What he does not realize is that all of this unrest in the city plays into Belacon's hands, because if the gates are opened fast enough, the player who is running Belacon says, look, if I can get in the city and shut those gates and rally the city to my banner, again, I will remind you, this city fell to the forces of Cull, the usurper, not so long ago. They are desperate for someone that can keep them safe. They may throw in with Belacon, close the gates, and tell the Tharks to go pound sand, and there's enough sand out there in the burning desert to keep them busy for a while. That is where the plans of the players stop working together and start to work against each other. And that's what we need to decide today. First of all, we need to establish that this revolt is going to take some time, and we need to look at how long this fight for the gatehouse is going to take. If the situation hangs in the balance, when the gladiators get to the gatehouse, they'll be able to tip the scales and seize the gatehouse. Then the question becomes, what happens once they have seized the gatehouse? Are there enough men of Ur present to allow the gatehouse to let in Belacon's men and lock the doors before Tal Karshak and his forces arrive, right? So that's what we need to decide. And I'm going to boil this down. We've been going at this for about 15 minutes. Believe me, it took me a pretty good chunk of time to figure out what all's going on. Bear in mind that the Red Trader... Let me go grab some dice. We're going to make a bit of a mini game out of this. First thing we're going to do is figure out how many of the Red Trader and his ex-gladiators, freed slaves, are able to get out of the arena and over to the gatehouse. Okay? I know we start with 70. Now, under normal circumstances, they would have about a 50-50 chance of being able to escape at all. However, with the Herald showing up, half of the guards bail, which means they are going to have half of the guards in the arena are going to bail on their charges, and that means they're going to have a much better possibility of escaping. In fact, they're guaranteed to escape. The question is, what percentage of them will be lost in that escape attempt? And to figure that out, now normally I would say, if you were going to do that, you're going to lose half your forces. But because of the reduced guards, what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll a D percentile, and I'm going to divide that by 2, and that is how many of these guys are able to escape. In fact, I'll tell you what, I'm going to divide by 4 because you have a lot of Tharks, and when the Red Trader shows up and says, hey, listen, I need to round up some of your guys so we can go defend, he's going to be able to basically perform a bit of deception to get the guards to lower their guard and allow them to attack. So percentile dice, divide by 4, that is the percentage. And as you see, I get a number 54. Which divides into 16. So 16% of these guys, or roughly 1 in 6, is going to... Did I get that right? Divide by 4, 54 is 26, 13. Oh, it's 13%. So that's about 1 in 8 of these guys is going to suffer immediately on making their escape. All right, that puts him at about 18 Tharks and 44 gladiators. Now they have to get through the city. And they have 2 choices. They can take a northern route or a southern route. If they take the northern route, they're going to be more likely to run into a patrol, but also more likely to avoid the patrol and thus additional casualties. If they take the southern route, they're going to be less likely to run into a patrol, but the patrols they run into will be a lot stronger. So let's say this. We're going to roll 5 times. I'm going to roll a d10. And on a 1 or a 2, they meet a patrol. And in order to fight their way through the patrol, let's see. So it's, let me write this down so you remember. It's going to be 5 chances. And they're going to run into, remember I said they're more likely. So they will run into a patrol on a roll of a 1 or a 2. And they will lose, let's say, anywhere from 10 to 20% fighting their way through those patrols. Okay, so it's either 10 or 20%. On the other hand, if they head through the no, we'll do 10 to 20% on the south here. Okay, because remember they do have the element of surprise. They do still look like they're led by the Red Trader. So in this case, we'll say we'll give 3 chances to have a 10% chance of encountering a patrol, and if they do encounter a patrol, they'll suffer 10 to 20% losses. Up here, it's going to be they'll run into a patrol on a 1 or a 2, but they're only going to suffer either 5 or 10% loss, okay? The question is, which way are they going to go? And on a 1 through 5, they'll go north. And I rolled a 1, so we got to roll 5 times. And I'm going to roll 5 d20s, which, as you know, are the same as a d10. I'm just going to ignore the 10's place. 20 counts as... So any 1, 2, 11, or 12 means they run into a patrol. And I got a 12. I got 1 chance that they hit 1 patrol. And that patrol, they're going to, on a 1 through 5, they suffer 5% losses. So they suffer 5% losses. And that 5% is 1 in 20. They're going to lose another Thark. And they're going to lose 2 more gladiators. So altogether, not too bad. They still have about 60 warriors that arrive at the gate. Now, they did take longer, right? We had 5 chances, so that's something else we need to factor in. That means there's going to be 5 rounds of combat fought between the loyalists and those who would surrender. And it gets a little weird, right? Because We're going to call the loyalists, those who are loyal to King Cull, and we are going to call the... but it gets a little weird because the traitors are loyal to the city, not the usurper. So let's call them the usurper's men and the city's men, okay? There's going to be 5 rounds of combat, and let's take a look at what forces are available to each side. We can forget the Red Slayers, who are going to stay in the palace, and we can forget the able-bodied citizens. Those are the patrols that our ex-gladiators ran into. We do have to deal with this, 2,150 guys. Half of them failed their morale check, and they ran off and are fighting in the city itself. I should say half of these guys still are manning the walls, but of those guys that are still on the walls, only 150 of them are in the gatehouse. Of the half that lost heart, I would say half of those guys ran off into the streets. They went to gather their family. They're looking to become refugees. The other half stayed to fight for the control of the gatehouse. And what that means is, up against 150 defenders, you've got about 220, let's see, half of them ran off, just straight up ran off, and now you've got 225 and 650, of which 125 and 325 are staying up on the walls, but you've only got 150 of those guys left, right? So this is the total amount of guys. This 450 guys are assaulting the gatehouse. So it's 450 versus of the men versus 150 defenders. That's at the time of the fight. This is a 3-to-1 advantage. If we were doing hex encounter, we would roll a d6. On that 3-to-1, we would give the defenders 2 column shifts because they're defending a gatehouse which is designed to be protected both from the inside and out. However, some of the guys were inside. So that's kind of what we're looking at. That 3-to-1 advantage is going to be key because I'm going to roll for losses per round, all right? It's going to be either 10% or 20% losses on, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll do 10% losses on the side of the defenders so that when the gladiators hit this point, no. I get that wrong. At that point, there will be, 75 defenders. And the question is, how many of the men of will be left? We've got 5 rounds of combat to go, and every round they're going to lose either... we can make it, why don't we call it 0, 5, or 10% losses. So this time around, what I'll do is roll 5d6, once for each round, and I'm not going to roll 5 times in a row and take 10% off each side. It's just going to be 10% off this 450, okay? For every result of a 1 or 2... I made a little chart. Hopefully you can read this. I'm going to roll 5d6. On a result of a 1, 0%. On a 2, 5%. On a 3 or 4, 10% losses. On a 5, 15. And on a 6, 20. So these guys could all be dead by the time our gladiators get there. Allow me a moment at this point in the scenario. I know we're at a cliffhanger. Give me just a minute. I want to work a plug-in. If you enjoy what we're doing here in the channel, take a look at this beautiful image here. The Wells of This is the latest collection from Pylum Press. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but one of the authors is a fellow by the name of John Mollison. If you want to support this channel, head on over to the link down in the description. Get yourself a copy of The Wells of In a strange bit of synchronicity, we have been planning this book for about 2 years, and it has just gone live this week at the same time that Dan Davis has his campaign reach a critical node and a decision point at the city of in his campaign world. Get yourself a copy. I promise you won't regret it. I am the least of the authors in this, and I'm pretty darn good. We now return you to our regularly scheduled Fall of Pretty big roll. So we got 20, 25, and then 30, 40, 55% of the attackers have been killed. If you run the numbers, that works out to a total of 200 survivors. When the 60, well, we'll call it's the 17 Tharks and 42 gladiators show up, they are going to tip the scale. I'm going to roll one more time, and we'll see what the losses are for both these ex-gladiators and the 200 defenders in order to break and defeat the last of these 75 defenders. And on a 5, they all lose 15%. That means they are going to be left with 170 men in control of the gates, ready to open them up for their saviors. On the other hand, we're going to lose another 6 gladiators. That will be 36. And at 15% of 17, we're going to lose one more. So we've got 16 Tharks and 36 gladiators who are standing in the gatehouse with 170 men. Let's take a look at how many hit dice we're looking at now. That means you've got 170 hit dice for the men. The Tharks each have 5 hit dice. So that's 80 hit dice here. And the gladiators each have 2 hit dice for 72, which is 152 hit dice worth of guys. So things hang in the balance. You've got 170 hit dice of city men versus 152 hit dice of the Tharks. And now things are starting to heat up. Belicon is getting starting to sweat out there because his plans aren't going as smoothly as he expected. He's a patient man. He's waiting for the gates to open. He hears the sounds of fighting and combat, and he smiles because he knows his plan is working. However, he looks around to this direction where the Tharks are getting closer and closer. And at some point, he's going to have to decide, does he charge the gate? Is he just going to go in and loot? Because if the Tharks get there before the gate opens and he can get all of his guys in, then he's just going to settle for whatever loot he can get from the city of Ur. This is another one of our decision points, where the fighting is raging for the gatehouse itself. The 2 forces that are both ready to open the gate have a decision to make. Do they open them now, or do they wait till the Tharks get there? That's the question we have to ask. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to play out a mini game here as well. And I will say, the actual point at which the Tharks get close enough that Tal Karshak shakes hands with Belicon and they say together and dive into the city is going to be, let's see how many, well, we don't know how many rounds it is. I'm going to set a number. And that number is going to be 5 plus a d6. That's how many rounds of combat we'll roll using this chart. 5 rounds plus a d6. They're going to fight for 7 rounds. If the gatehouse can be controlled within 7 rounds of combat, then the city will be looted by both sides. If it takes any more, excuse me, I got that backwards. If the defenders can hold out, this 170 guys, if they can hold out for 7 rounds, Belicon will go in and he will take control of the city, locking the gates and locking the Tharks out. Okay? Otherwise, if the Tharks win, or if the fight rages for more than 7 rounds, that's when you will also have that handshake. I think I said that right. So we're going to roll. I'm going to keep a running tally here. We've got, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to grab myself a pen. I hope this shows up a little better. So, has 170 hit dice, and the Tharks have 152. And I'm going to roll a dice for the green men, and I'm going to roll a die for the men. And in the first round, so this is round 1, the men of suffer no casualties. The Tharks suffer 20% casualties. So they are down to 130. I'm just going to round down to 130. On round number 2, it goes badly for the men of They suffer 20% casualties. They suffer 34, bringing them to 135. The Tharks lose 10, that's 13, bringing them down to 127. On the third round, the men of Ur suffer no casualties. The Tharks suffer 20% casualties. That is, you know what? It's 15. Every 10% is 15. I'm going to keep this simple, okay? So the fact that these guys suffered the 10% casualties takes them down to 115. Let me just make a little note there. 10 equals 15. Okay. During the third round of combat, we're left with 135 here, and these guys lose another 30. That brings them down to 85. On the fourth round of combat, everybody loses 15%. So everybody is going to lose, let's just call it 25% of their troops. We're down to 90 here for the men of Ur, and we are down to lose 60 hit dice on the part of the Tharks. On the fifth round, it goes badly for the men of Ur. They are now down to 60 hit dice, and the Tharks suffer 10%. They are down to 45. On the sixth round, 10% for everybody means that we're going to be down to 45, and we are going to be down at 10% here to 30. And then on the seventh round, now we can run the numbers here. If the green die comes up a 6, the last of the Tharks is defeated and the gates will open. I think that's the only thing that happens here. 20% here will kill 30. There will be men of Ur left standing at the end of this engagement. And with the result of a 5, we are going to lose another 25. So there are 20 men of Ur holding the gates, and the Tharks still have 15 guys. So the battle is raging for an 8th round, and we really can stop right here. I'm going to go ahead and roll. The Tharks suffer no losses. The men of Ur are down to their last 5 guys. It's 5 to 15. And on round number 9, it's going to be a loss of, well, you know, if we do the 15%, it's a tie. We'll call this 0. The Tharks just barely with 10 survivors. And I think we're going to call that the Red Traitor is one of them. He's got 5 hit dice, and we're going to give him 5, what would that be? 2 ex-gladiators. And in a normal D&D campaign, the Red Traitor would be a phenomenal NPC. These 3 men are the last alive, and they hold the gate long enough for the Tharks to sweep around. Tal Karshak and Bela Khan have agreed to whatever their agreement is for splitting the spoils. They flood into the city. As soon as they flood into the city, now we got to look at what the player who is controlling the defenders of Ur says. He says, hey, I've got 500 guys that are going to go out and they're going to defend the city as best they can. However, 20 of the Red Slayers will sneak the king, Cull, out of the city. If it appears the city will fall, which it has, they're going to spirit him out through a hidden gate to the south. Well, to the south tells me it's through whatever district this is here, which, as you can see, is within sight, and, you know, there's going to be outriders and whatnot. So the other question we have to determine is, these 20 Red Slayers and their king, I don't know what this Cull is like. The regular Cull wouldn't have been caught this way. He would have been a heck of a lot more proactive, I can tell you that. But what we're going to do to determine whether or not Cull escapes, because remember, Bela Khan demanded Cull's head on a platter, or he demanded to judge Cull. The question is, does Cull escape with 20 of his Red Slayers, these elite troops? And I'm going to give that, given that the city has fallen and everybody wants to get a piece of the pie, I'm going to give him a pretty good chance, you know, historically speaking, to escape. These are elite guys. They know the territory. They're used to fighting in the desert. Of course, everybody is, so that's kind of a neutral. But they're not distracted. They're men on a mission, whereas all of the rest of the invaders are men who are interested in the gold and the slaves and the women's and the drugs and presumably the wells of Ur. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the city. But as I said, we're going to roll, and I'm going to roll, and on a result of 51 to 100, Cull escapes. If the result is a 1 through 25, he is captured by Tal Karshak. And on a 92, he escapes. So there's still a faction of the men of Ur. Cull and 20 red slayers have escaped. The other question, and I'm not going to answer this question, but you now have it's very much a fall of Constantinople situation, where the defenders of the city have no hope of delaying these conquerors anymore. The city is fallen, and it's just basically a two-way civil war. What kind of casualties will these two patrons suffer, Tal Karshak and Bela Khan? I don't know. Probably not a lot. Like we said, city fighting is a tough business. It may be close to around 10%, because you are talking about organized guys. The one downside for the horde of Bela Khan is they're all mounted. And mounted troops don't do great when they're fighting in close quarters in city streets. But they are well-drilled, they're well-trained. You've only got a loose affiliation. You've got basically, 49 bands of about 10 guys running around slowing them down. So I'm not going to even get into that. I'm going to turn that back over to Dan Davis. If it was me running this, I would say, yeah, both of these guys are going to suffer anywhere from a 10 to 20% loss. And I would roll dice just like I did. I would say it's going to be, maybe even roll 2d10, right? This will be your percentage. For Tal Karshak, you are going to lose a 5 and 1. 6% of your guys are dead. And the hordes of Bela Khan, they're going to lose 9 and 18. It's going to be 17%. So if I was running this, I would say Tal Karshak came out really well. He lost his Thark warriors inside the city, but he only lost 6% of his forces, and I would do that, numerically. The horde of Bela Khan, they really took it on the chin. The horses didn't do great inside the city, but those numbers are for the DM to decide. In the meantime, I just want to reiterate what we demonstrated today. You can have an insanely complicated plot in which players, and all of these messages were sent via either direct message on social media or email or even phone calls. Imagine picking up a phone and talking to someone about what you want your guy to do. What an amazing experience for these guys who are fielding not just, oh, my level 1 fighter, plus I have 2 henchmen. No. This is epic style gaming. This is gaming at a higher level. And I can't tell you how honored I am that they felt enough trust in me to sit down and shove the pieces around the game board and decide who lives and who dies. We had a little bit of help, of course, from the Fates, but ultimately sitting down and running through this game was a fantastic exercise. As you can see, in addition to the several hours of prep work, it really only took about, 30 minutes to put this together. And this is the kind of thing you should think about doing in your games. Even if you are running the kind of street level campaign with, a revolving band of low level adventurers going out into the wilderness or, walking through the sewers, killing giant rats and were-rats or whatever. When you have patrons up here at the global level driving this kind of action, oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. Finger kisses all around. Thanks, guys. I'm praying for you.